On a cold December night in Berlin in 2019, skullduggery was afoot at the Invalidenfriedhof military cemetery. A person or persons, still unknown, dug down into an unmarked grave, but seemed to have been disturbed and fled, according to a police report. The grave, it was confirmed somewhat surprisingly by the police, belonged to none other than SS Obergruppenführer Reinhard Heydrich, the second most powerful man in the SS, until his assassination by British-trained Czechoslovak agents in Prague in 1942. Heydrich had lain forgotten in his cold grave since 1942, undisturbed until that night in December 2019. The police told reporters that the grave had been opened, but, quote, no bones were recovered, end quote. They added that whoever violated Heydrich's grave is thought to have had inside knowledge of its location. The last comment is correct, for only a very few researchers and historians have known of the location of Heydrich's grave since the end of World War II, and until the Berlin police statement, no official German government agencies had admitted to its location or even its existence. So what were the grave robbers after? If they had gone to the trouble of locating the lost grave and then launching an effort to excavate it, the potential reward must have been worth the jail time if they were caught. My own research suggests that in Heydrich's grave are extremely valuable artifacts that would be worth a fortune on the illicit Nazi collectors market, suggesting that the grave robbery was a steal-to-order operation, perhaps for some shadowy collector or collectors, much like heists involving priceless paintings that can never be sold on the open market. Reinhard Heydrich ran the Gestapo, the SD, the Sicherheitsdienst, the SS Police Department, and the Kripo, the criminal police, and was Reichsprotector of occupied Bohemia and Moravia, or the Germans renamed parts of Czechoslovakia. He had been responsible for much of the anti-Semitic operations earlier in Nazi history, and was administratively charged with the planning and coordination of the final solution against the Jews, that led directly to the mass deportations of millions of people to camps in the East, and their murder from 1942 onwards. He was also responsible for the brutalization of the Czech population, earning him the nickname the Butcher of Prague. After Heydrich was assassinated, the SS instituted a campaign of retribution and terror against innocent Czechs, killing 5,000 people and razing several villages to the ground. The dead Heydrich was raised up by Hitler and Himmler to the status of a Nazi martyr, and his funeral was extremely elaborate and lengthy. On the 5th of June, 1942, Heydrich's coffin, draped in the German flag, was conveyed through the streets of Prague atop a gun carriage escorted by SS troops. The coffin was then publicly displayed in the courtyard of a palace for 2 days. On the 7th of June, the coffin was borne on a special train to Berlin, and his body taken to his headquarters at the Reich Main Security Office on Prinz Albrechtstrasse to lay in state for a further 2 days. The funeral service, attended by Hitler, Himmler, Göring, and most senior members of the German military, SS, and state, along with Heydrich's 2 young sons, was conducted in the mosaic room of the new Reich Chancellery. At the conclusion of the service, Hitler bestowed upon Heydrich the posthumous award of the German Order, an award only given 12 times in the history of the regime. Borne again on a gun carriage, a huge funeral cortege escorted the coffin to the Invalidenfriedhof military cemetery, where Heydrich was buried with pomp and circumstance, a temporary wooden iron cross marking the spot. Hitler planned that Heydrich would be exhumed soon afterwards and moved into a special Nazi mausoleum to lie alongside other important dead Nazis. Due to the war situation, this never happened, and Heydrich's grave remained as it was until the Soviets took over in Berlin in May 1945. Any monuments or markers displaying Nazi symbols were of course destroyed by the Soviets, and this is what happened to Heydrich's grave marker. In the Cold War in 1961, when the Berlin Wall was built, it ran right through the Invalidenhof cemetery, and Heydrich's grave found itself in East Berlin. By now the grave was completely unmarked. It was, as it is today, a rather scrappy piece of muddy grass, without any markings whatsoever. So what may be inside Heydrich's coffin that is of interest to grave robbers? He was buried in a very expensive, extremely well-built coffin that may have survived rather well after 80 years underground. Due to the fact that Heydrich was given a full military funeral, we can assume that his corpse was buried in one of his SS general's uniforms, and I would surmise that he was buried in his full-dress black uniform, rather than a field-grey everyday tunic. His decorations and medals were displayed prominently on cushions during his funeral, and I believe they would have been returned to his widow. However, high-ranking officers had of course multiple tunics and duplicate sets of medals pinned to each, avoiding the onerous task of completely transferring multiple awards between tunics if the officer changed clothes. Therefore, it is probable that he was buried in a uniform with a tunic displaying a full set of his awards. Another object that would be of great interest to illicit collectors was Heydrich's SS honor sword. Himmler instituted the practice of awarding select SS officers very special ceremonial daggers and swords. He himself often wore a straight SS sword at official functions, and in this photo we see Himmler and Heydrich wearing honor swords, the latter a special award given to him by Himmler in the 1930s called the SS Ehrendegen der Reichsführer SS, the SS honor sword of the Reichsführer. Some examples of these very fine swords were looted by Allied occupation troops from the effects of various Nazi leaders at the end of the war, and have appeared and been sold at auction in the 2000s, some achieving very high prices. It's my contention that following the SS funeral rites that aped those of the pagan Vikings, Heydrich's honor sword would have been placed in the coffin beside him. I have even heard, though I can't confirm, that due to the strong bond between Himmler and Heydrich, that Himmler actually exchanged his own sword for that of the dead Heydrich's, and that it was Himmler's sword that was buried in Heydrich's grave in Berlin. Either way, if true, the recovery of either of these swords would make somebody extremely rich. It is interesting to note that, to my knowledge, neither Himmler nor Heydrich's honor swords have been seen since the end of the war. So for now, what may or may not lie in Heydrich's grave will remain a mystery. Many thanks for watching. Please subscribe and share, and also visit my audiobook channel, War Stories with Mark Felton. You can also help to support both of my channels at PayPal and Patreon. Details in the description box below.